God does things that are crazy amazing. I call those things crazy God stories, and this is the Crazy God Story Podcast. My name is Chris. Hey everyone, I am here today with my friend I met from TikTok. His name is DeMarlynn. How you doing, DeMarlynn?
Doing great. How are you doing, Chris?
Man, I'm doing fantastic. I'm excited for this, excited to get to hear your story. Because I know you had messaged me and I was reading a little bit about what you said. And, you struggled with, you were homeless for a while, struggled, through a lot of things. And just seems like you just struggled to figure out life until you found Jesus.
Yes. Actually, life was very hard. I knew Jesus as a young child, but as I got older, I sort of, I guess you could say, ran away because of all my problems and all the things that were going on in my life. And I just felt I didn't feel loved. And that was a very big lie from the enemy that I
Man,
believed for.
but how many people struggle with that same thing, with just feeling like unloved and feeling lonely and just there's something that they feel like they need and they don't know where to get it or how to fill it. I mean, I know I've struggled with that. I've struggled with loneliness substantially, and I talked to so many people that it's like I needed to be loved, and that was what was missing in their life, man. So yeah, I'm glad you're sharing this because I think it's such a common issue that people deal with, that people will be able to relate to.
Well, I can't put a number on it, but I know for a fact, like when I was in high school, there was a lot of people because, well, when I was in high school, we thought if we go party, if we go smoke drugs, or if we go chase a high, then that would bring excitement and it would fill a void. But it was only momentarily, like 5 minutes, and it was like God's there for eternity, and then you want this 5 minute chase, and I thought the 5 minute chase was easier because there was no rules to it. There was like, well, you can't do this, you can't do that, so I'm just gonna go chase the 5 minute chase, but it catches up with you, and
Yeah.
that's what I start realizing.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times too, when you're chasing that like momentary, like you call it, a 5 minute thing, and actually in Hebrews it talks about that with Moses, how he was basically a prince in the nation of Egypt, and it says that he chose not to embrace like the passing pleasure of sin, but instead go with God's people. And I think one of the things that happens when I know for me this was true, and everybody I've ever talked to, it's true. When you go chasing that, like you said, 5 minutes of pleasure, it always leaves you more empty than you were before you started pursuing it.
Yeah, it definitely does. It left a big hole in my heart, and like, so my past addictions, I was addicted to drugs, pornography, sex, like just the basics is what people, those like the three basics, but I took it very deeply, and people don't understand that leaves like a bigger hole than you had before. And like people don't understand, like you're getting entwined with people that you don't know what they're dealing with. So now what they were dealing with, you're dealing with as well. And it carries on. And it's tough. It's really tough because at the moment you think, oh, I'm having the time of my life. Oh, party boys. Oh, we're going lit. What's the new slang for my generation? The hot boy summer. Oh my
Oh,
gosh.
yeah. Man, and the thing about that though is one of the things I think that does too is it builds a lot of really shallow, empty, just hollow relationships, because you've got those friend groups that you're going out and partying with or whatever, and you know when you're not doing those things with them, like it's a lot of times those relationships, there's no substance to them. And so if you're not out partying with them, if you're not out, doing whatever they're doing, chasing whatever they're chasing, then they don't have time for you, and they'll blow you off a lot of times to go do that stuff if you got something else going on.
Yeah, because something I tell my students, because I work at a church now. God does a lot of
Okay.
things. But I tell my students or just kids that look up to me, it's like, bro, you're going out here getting high with these people. Imagine if you stop getting high for a week and you stop texting them for a week, they're not going to come back to you. It's like they only care about you when the moment matters, when momentarily. Like the people that I used to hang out with all the time, they don't even text me anymore.
What can you do for them? That's
Exactly.
really, it's really what it is. It's what can you do for them? What can you score for them? What, what girl can you introduce them to? What are you bringing to the party? Are you the designated driver tonight? What can you do for them? And as soon as you can't do something for them, they don't have a use for you because they're not interested in you as much as they are in chasing that 5 minutes of pleasure. I
It's
like I
all
like
about
that you called it that 5 minutes of pleasure, man. That's about right.
it's all about what you can offer when it comes to situations like that.
Yeah, man. So you went through this phase or this, big chunk of your life where you were, pursuing the next 5 minutes of pleasure. And like what got you I know you said you were homeless for a while. Was it something where your family was just poor or like, you made some bad decisions and weren't able to stay at home anymore and so you ended up like on the streets or what kind of got you to that point where you were homeless?
Okay, so the first time I was homeless was when my mom was alive, and she was a single parent of three. My mom worked her butt off all the time, but there was just moments where things got too heavy, and my mom was one of those people, like she depended on God, but she would never, like, she's not going to go out there and like ask for help. She's just going to believe God's going to provide, and God did provide in the end. After our struggle, we didn't have a place to call ours, but luckily there was friends of the family out there that it wasn't our place, but they let us come stay and let my mom build up her money. And out of that, we went from apartment to homeless to a duplex. Like, my mom worked very hard.
Okay.
And second time I was homeless, it wasn't more so on me, but my dad made a lot of money, but I just feel like he used his money in the wrong ways that allowed us to be homeless. And no one ever knew that I was homeless because I'm not out there trying to show it. I was still going to school every day, but there was days where I wore the same clothes like from yesterday and had to wash my clothes in the sink or hang them up in the shower rod. But it was all part of God's plan. That's all I got to say.
Yeah. Okay. Now you said also one of the things you told me is that you actually at one point you almost died. Like what happened with that or what brought that on and how'd you get out of that?
So I have what they call sickle cell anemia.
Oh, okay.
It's it's a blood order disease. Everyone, you know how everyone's red blood cells are like circles. Well, I have some that are like moon crescents, and that's originally what they thought was wrong with me. I was just having like crisis, what they call sickle cell crisis, when your blood blockage is up. But that's not what it was. I actually was stressing so much and fighting so much with my dad that I had ulcers inside of my stomach that was like eating me. I had 5 holes in my stomach that were bleeding, and I was not able to retain food. I wasn't able to get up and walk. I was super lightheaded every time I tried to move around, and I was the lowest. I lost 40 pounds, but the lowest I ever was
Wow.
154, and I had a hemoglobin of 3.1 when I made it to the hospital.
Wow. What's a normal hemoglobin for because I don't know what it should be. Like what should it be?
It should be, especially for me, it should always be in the nines and tens. Like, that's a normal. But since I have sickle cell, it has to be like up there. It has to be super high. And I had a low iron level. So anything that has to do with blood for me has to be high, because if it's not, then it's not good for business.
So when you had this thing where you had to go to the hospital, you almost died. Was that at a point where you were, using like drugs and stuff, or was it a point where you were clean?
So I was before this time I was clean. I've gotten high like times before, but it wasn't like a continuously. It was like a once every blue moon. So like
Okay.
about five or that over the spread of like 3 years. But then after that, when I got out of the hospital and I was getting all healed up, going into my junior year of high school, because it happened my sophomore year, but going into my junior year of high school, when I got out of the hospital, that's when I just started getting high and getting high. And that summer is when it really just took off.
Okay. All right. Well, so let me ask this. So I have like a ton of questions that I could ask you. And um I think though what I'd like to do is have you just kind of take us through your life up to the point where you met Jesus. Like give us like a timeline. Cause I mean, the questions I'm asking, man, we're kind of like jumping around at different points. I'd like to get some like chronology of, what got you when you really started to get to that point where you were trying to, fill that void of where you were just missing that love in your life to other stuff to where, it just kind of, I'm guessing it took you down to the depths from what I was reading, from what you wrote. And then I want to get to where Jesus pulled you up out of that. So I kind of give us like a timeline because
Okay,
yeah, I
I
think
can
it'll
do that.
help us better to relate to you and your story if we're actually hearing the story, not just answering a bunch of random questions for me jumping around.
Okay, timeline. So it all started like me. I knew Jesus from since I was little. Like I used to go to church. My mom was a minister. Me and my mom went to church every Sunday. I didn't miss a Sunday. I didn't miss a service. And I went to one of those churches where they had like 3 services in one day.
Nice.
Like you're at church all day, and it's like, I want to go home. But as a kid, that's how you feel. And I used to go to church. I used to flip in the Bible every day. I used to go to Job, and I'd be like, I love the word Job, and it was like job. And so, hey, so y'all remember that Job? Remember that? So I thought it was job, but as years go by, when I was 8 years old, my mom passed away, and this is a very like time in my life where I didn't understand anything, and it was like, well, she goes to work a lot. Like she works some days, she doesn't come back, but it's like, what do you mean she's gone? And I'm seeing her in a casket. And I'm like, what are y'all doing? So then after that, it's like I moved with my sister, and then I was like, I want to go stay with my dad. That's what I said. Little did I know what I was getting myself into. So I went and stayed with my dad. And the first week of staying with my dad, he was like, I'm taking you to your sister's house for the weekend. And I come back home. Well, I get over to my sister's house, and that Monday morning, all my stuff is there. Like he dropped off everything that was at his house to my sister's house, and I was like, I don't feel wanted. I don't feel loved. Like, why are you doing this to me? I'm only 8. I'm not too long ago. Like, why are you doing this to me? So all my life, I was filling that void of wanting to be loved. So going through that, I moved back and forth, back and forth with my sister and my dad. Eventually, I stayed with my dad for a while. And during that time, we argued every day. Like we fought every day. It was like World War III over there, chaos every single day. And eventually, it got to a point where like I knew how to avoid arguments, which was by going other places, not staying at home at nighttime. Because my dad, he used to smoke a lot of weed. I don't know if he still does, but he used to smoke a lot of weed, and I knew the times where he wasn't high or the times where he was trying to get high were the times we argued. So I usually just let him do his thing, and that's how I would avoid arguments. Or I would just go out, uh, find ways to get money to go have fun with friends. This is when I had good friends. But
Okay.
then eventually high school comes around. Well, middle school is when me and my dad became homeless. We were living in a hotel sometimes, or figuring out where I was going to go, and he'll figure out where he was going to go. Or he was with
Wow.
the like a couple of his girlfriends. He had a lot of girlfriends. This was like a bad look on it, and it was like,
And how old were you at that point?
so middle school I was around like 13, 14.
So at 13, 14 years old, your dad and you don't always have a place to live. And when you don't have like a hotel to stay at, he finds someone to stay with, and then he's just kind of like, all right, DeMarlynn, you're on your own, dude. And you got to figure out how to like take care of yourself and all that kind of stuff while he's staying somewhere else.
Well, no, like he would want to figure out me go somewhere else and him go somewhere else, but we would
Okay.
we would go together. But like you said, me learning how to take care of myself, like all my life since my mom passed away, I did take care of myself. Like my dad would be out of it. He'd be high, or he would, when we did have a place to stay, he would go stay at his girlfriend's house, and I would be at home by myself. And eventually, after we weren't homeless anymore, we got a 1-bedroom apartment. So I didn't have a bed to sleep in. I was sleeping in the living room, on the floor, or on the couch. It was my pick. And that's kind of how it was all the way to high school. 1-bedroom apartment. I I would go every weekend. I would never be home. I would always be at a friend's house because my friend's parents showed a lot more love than my dad did. They were there. They they cared for me in ways that I didn't have people to care for me. So then it comes around to high school. This is where things get crazy because that high school moment is when everybody wants to feel like the man. So I played sports all my life. So
Okay.
I played football for 14 years of my life. And high school is where like everyone wants to get to go to college and be D1. So I'm like, I'm doing good freshman year, and then sophomore year I get sick, and it's like, ooh, that's the year that everyone's supposed to peak and get better. And it's like, God, why are you doing this to me? Like football has always been my dream. You know that. Like,
So
why are you
so let me ask this real quick. So you've been going through all this stuff. Did you kind of like in the midst of all that stuff, did you still like hold on to your faith with God through that? Or was it like because you're saying, okay, you were saying to God, hey, what's going on? Were you still holding on to faith through all the stuff with like your mom dying, bouncing around with your dad? Or was it kind of like something that you kind of forgot about? Where was God at like up
so
to this point in your life?
God was uh in the back of my mind, to be honest. Like God was in the back of my mind. I had no faith. I was like, but in that moment, I'm like, God, like you love me. Why are you doing this to me? Like a very big misconception is that the enemy wanted to tell me. It's like God killed your mom. That's what the enemy told me. It's like
Wow.
God took my mom, and now it's like I'm about to die, and like why are you taking me? But as I got down the line, I kind of figured out. Well, I didn't kind of figure out, but I figured out that those were lies from the enemy. But God showed me something in that year of my life that I just got to understand right now. It was like you're gonna need me in the highs and the lows, especially the lows, but you can't just call on me in the lows. You gotta call on me in the highs because I,
Yeah.
I was like on my deathbed and it was like, God, I need you right now. And that's when my other family came around, my mom's side of the family. I would always love to go over to my mom's side of the family, but my dad wouldn't let me because he didn't want me to go stay with them. Like he didn't want me to move away.
Wow.
So when I was in the hospital, so I was in the hospital 2 times before the last time. The first time they kept me overnight, but my dad dropped me off. He was there, and then he brought my little cousin. My little cousin stayed in the hospital room with me, and my dad was gone. I knew where he was, but I was just like, why? Like, why'd you leave me? But when it was time for me to discharge, he came back and took me. And then the last time, me and my dad, I was like, this is when I told my dad, I was like, I'm moving out. He's like, you're not going nowhere. He's like, you're not leaving this place. You're gonna stay here with me. I'm your daddy. You're gonna do what I say. And we argued, like, and he left, him and his one of his girlfriends. Like I was filled with so much anger as well. So we were arguing, and I told his girlfriend, I was like, "You don't eat like you're not my mom." Like I used to tell all his girlfriends that because they always wanted to be like stepmom, and I'm like, "You're not my mom. You will never ever fill the void because my mom was an angel, and you guys don't come close to it." So he leaves, and when he's leaving, I pass out, and he's like gone. Like I'm out of it, blacked out. Luckily, before I blacked out, I called my sister.
Now
And
was it the sickle cell that caused you to black out?
no, it was the ulcers.
Okay.
So I called my sister, and my sister wasn't that far. And she was getting off of work when I called her. and she rushed over. I was like, come help me get my stuff. Like I told her I was leaving. Like I told her I was leaving that day. I was like, come help me pack my stuff. So she was coming over. And when she gets there, I'm just like blacked out all over the floor, like
Wow.
out of it. She walks in. Luckily, the door was unlocked. Uh, and so she calls the ambulance. I did not want to ride with the ambulance. I'm like, if I'm going to go, I'm going to be next to someone that I know that loves me. So my sister's like, the ambulance, y'all can escort. They escorted us, and she was just making sure I was awake. But before I was getting out of the house to go to her car, I blacked out again.
Wow.
And they were like carrying me. I was like, I weighed 154, but my body was like dead weight, like no energy, no. I was out of it. So I make it to the hospital, and the last thing I remember is me laying on a table with white light and everything going pitch black.
Wow.
Like, and I woke up. I woke up in a room. Like after that, I woke up in a room. They gave me a blood transfusion. I was in the hospital for 5 days. Mind you, these 5 days, my dad only came one day. And that's because I told him I'm still moving out. Like after this is over, I was still moving out. Like through the midst of all the chaos, I still saw a little bit of peace. I saw a little bit of light. I saw a way out from all the darkness that I was living in, a way out from all the anger I was living in. So he was like, he
So,
comes up. Oh, what were you gonna
oh,
say?
no, I was just going to ask. So now, had you already started like into all the drugs and everything at this point?
No, this
Okay.
is
Okay. I'm just
after.
trying to keep. Oh, this is after or before?
No, the drugs are after this.
Okay. Okay. Keep going, man.
So he gets me like he comes to the hospital out of one of those 5 days, and he's like, you're not moving out. Like my aunt's there. So my aunt and uncle is who I stay with now, but my aunt was there. She was like, well, Michael, that's my dad's name. She was like, Michael, well, maybe it's just you guys need to let go. You need to part ways. And like they're big on faith. They're big because my mom's side of the family, they're big on faith. So then after that, he leaves. He doesn't come back. And I'm still, mind you, I'm still in the hospital. Like I can't eat food. They won't let me eat food. They're trying to figure out what's wrong with me. I go into surgery, all of this. He's gone. didn't have a care in the world. And that kind of like showed his true colors about how like he felt about me. Because you can't say you love someone, but when they're like literally about to die in your face and you're like, oh, bye. Like I don't care.
Yeah. That's not good. That's, man, that had to have been really tough and chewed you up. Um,
Oh yeah, it was terrible. It hurt very bad. But after those 5 days,
I just here's kind of what I'm hearing. You know, the person your mom's gone, and the one person left that's supposed to love you the most just really treated you like you weren't worth anything. And I mean, you said, you know, you really you know, you had said you had felt, you know, worthless, you know, when you went to live with your dad because, you know, he had kicked you out, you know, to back to your sisters, but man, just the person that's supposed to love you unconditionally just to not. Wow, that's
yeah, it was bad. And the reasons when he did show love was for the wrong reasons at the moment. But so after those 5 days, they do the surgery. They go in and they take pictures of my stomach and they see the holes and they like spray it with something I don't know, but they heal me inside. But I wasn't supposed to like recover as fast as I did, but God had different plans. So
amen.
I recovered like in a snap, like super quick. So then after that, I moved with my aunt and my uncle when I get out of the hospital. It was still a hassle to try to get my stuff. Like my dad wasn't at the apartment. He was at his girlfriend's house, which where I knew he was. And so I make him come down and I get my stuff and I'm gone. And so I've been living with my aunt and uncle for like 3 years now. Yeah, 3 years. So get through all of that. I'm living with my aunt and uncle. And then as the school year is winding down my sophomore year, that's when I start smoking. I start getting high. Like I used to go home high. She didn't know. She was like super oblivious to it actually. Like, she had no idea. And there was always speculations, but they wouldn't flat out be like, "Are you high?" So summer comes and I'm getting high like every day, every single day. Like there was like not a day that went by that I didn't get high. I go to football practice, get high before football practice. That's how it was like. But I felt like it was bettering me. That's how I felt. That's what the enemy wanted me to
Okay.
believe, that bettering me. It was making me a better person. It was healing me. And it really wasn't. It was actually, what it was doing was, it was making me feel like I needed that. Like I needed that to make me whole. I needed that to make me a happy person. But it wasn't. So um the after I get through all smoking, my people and my family finds out because I got super high one day and I had a trip. Uh it was God. I know it was God. God was like, he kept sending me lifelines to stop smoking, but this was the last time. He was like, "You want to keep getting high? I'm gonna show you what happens." And it was like, I usually get this high all the time, but I guess I smoked and then I went into this mindset of like, I'm drifting away. I felt like I was dying. That's literally how I felt. But I was super wide awake. I was just very, very out of it. And I'm walking back home. I called the ambulance. I'm like, I can't breathe. They were like, "What's wrong?" I was like, "I'm super high." That's what I told them. And then I hang up the phone and then I start walking back. I'm like, "I'm okay. I'm fine." And then I get to the house and I call one of my friends, quote unquote, the people I used to get high with. He was like, "Oh, you're good. Just drink some water." I was like, "I can't." He's like, "Drink some water, eat some food." I made a big bowl of cereal, like super big bowl. This is very funny actually to me. This last time, super big bowl of cereal. And then I go back upstairs and I call the ambulance. I was like, "I need help." It was like, so they show up, and mind you, we live in a neighborhood, uh, some very good people. Like this is the transition from where I'm from and where I grew up to where I was living at the moment is just totally different. There's like houses, there's some nice people over there, there's people with some money, there's a cop that lives across the street, like
Okay.
have that. So everyone's looking like, "Oh my God, what's going on? What's going on? What's going on?" The neighbor comes over. She's like, "What's wrong with you?" I was like, "I'm high." She's like, "Why are you doing that stuff?" Like I'm telling my business to the world. Like I'm sitting there confessing, and I didn't even know I was confessing.
Wow.
So my aunt, uncle, my grandma, my sister, they all come. Like everyone was super disappointed in me. They told me they were super disappointed in me. It's like, "We trusted you. Now you got to rebuild that trust." And I was like, dang, like I made everybody look bad. But that was like, well, I did smoke a week after that, but it felt like that same little trance trip came over me again. And it was like, yeah, no. And then I did try after the little trance trip like two more times, but after that I was done. So going into my
So,
senior year,
so hold on. So one of the things you'd kind of said was, you thought, maybe God kind of sent that or whatever, and I find that amazing because you said, you started, believing God when you were a kid, like you accepted Jesus, but, walked away, real obviously, and your life was just so hard. And in the midst of that, like it kind of, from what I'm getting from what you're saying, is you think God was kind of like trying to pull you back to him or something like that.
because I did, when I moved to my aunt and uncle, I did start going back to church
Okay.
because they would every Sunday. So I would still be getting high, but like going to church. It connected me back with God.
Okay.
So I would go to church with them on Sundays, but on my Wednesday nights, my boss, who used to be my youth pastor, um, he came when he first got hired. He came to my high school, and this was in the middle of me smoking. He came and told his testimony, and how he used to be a drug addict and how he recovered and all the bad things that he's been through. And that's where the seed was really planted. So the seed's always been planted, but I've had like, in the first part of of so like Job, in the story of Job, in the first part when all the bad things start to happen.
Job.
Yeah. that's how I was feeling at first. I was like, God, like, I trust you, but why? In the same sense, I was questioning him. And then all through it all, how Job was like just complaining and screaming at God, like, why? That's what he wanted to know. And that's how I was feeling. And so fast forward to what was that? Fast forward to senior year. This is when life really hits, like football offers get to rolling in. I'm like, bro, I'm going D1. Like, that's what I was telling myself. And the truth of the fact of the matter was I was able to go D1, but God had a different plan for me.
Really?
I was able to go D1.
There's not a lot of people that have the talent to say, man, I could go D1. Like that's I mean, okay, that's impressive.
Like I was truly blessed, and that was an achievement of mine. I was like, I always want to go D1, but that let me know that I could do it if I wanted to. So, but how that story works out was the school, the head coach follows me on Twitter. I'm like, bro, I'm gonna shoot my shot. I shot my shot, I knew someone that went to that school, so I called their coach. He gave me the number. He was like, if you get your acceptance letter in by the time camp calls, we'll give you a walk-on scholarship. And you can come.
Wow. What school was it?
Houston Baptist University.
Okay.
How that worked out was I got my acceptance letter 3 days after. 3 days after.
Wow.
And I was like, that was an extra confirmation from God. But what God was calling me to was something that I never saw myself doing. So what I do now, spreading the word on TikTok, I never saw myself doing. But God always had this plan, and may not have the path that I took to begin with may not have been the plan that he had in the beginning. But he always finds a way to turn the bad things that the enemy meant for evil to good. And he always finds a way to maneuver around the obstacles and knock over the barriers, because he is stronger and powerful than anything that the enemy can put in his way.
Yeah, man. Okay, so we got a little gap there. You know, you got you'd been using dope for a little bit, and you know, it seems like God was kind of trying to pull you out of that and pull you to something else. You know, you know, Division I thing didn't quite work out. What was the point where you know, and because what was the point where you said, okay, I've got to actually stop all this, and where you went from, because what you're telling me is, you know, you were going to church with your aunt and uncle and them, and still living for the world. So you're, I think, doing what a lot of people do, what a lot of us have done at some point if we're Christian. You know, there's a lot of people that it's like they're trying to do both, live in the world and live for Jesus, and that never works. I mean, I don't know anybody that is happy you know, in that lifestyle. And so what was the point where, you know, God's trying to pull you out of those drugs? What was the point where you went, okay, I'm going to stop the world, and now I'm going to, you know, break that off and live for Jesus? Like, what got you to that point? And yeah.
Okay, so senior year, this is where the gap comes. Senior year is when I start sleeping with like every girl, well, not every girl, but having sex a lot, like with different women. And I stopped smoking, but I started drinking. But I wasn't like the person to get super drunk, because I didn't like alcohol at all. But some of my friends were like, bro, it's just beer. So I would be like, okay, I'm not drinking a
Peer
beer.
pressure.
Yeah, I was like, I'm not drinking a beer, but I'll drink something else. So then I start drinking. So when all of this like really cuts out is when last year in August, well, no, July, I got COVID. And that's when it was like that moment of COVID. It was like God really opened my eyes. He was like, you don't really have a lot of people that you really hang out with that really truly care for you living for Jesus. And then that's when, in that moment, I just like, I'm gonna stop. I'm gonna stop doing everything that I do. I'm gonna stop drinking. I'm gonna stop being with different girls. The girls thing did stop. Like it stopped in that moment. But the drinking thing, it stopped like the next month. So August was the last time I ever had a drink of alcohol. And after that, like a couple of weeks later, I got a job at the church. I quit the restaurant industry. And it was like, I'm living for Jesus. Like I used to make a lot of money at the restaurant, but God is way more important than money. And then after that, a
Yes,
couple of
sir.
couple of weeks later, I get a promotion, and it's like I'm on full staff at the church, and it's like God's really moving. And ever since then, I've never looked back, and I've always put God first before anything. Like God is my number one commitment.
Wow. So the thing that, you said you were always chasing, it was, the love that you weren't getting. And I think one thing that's important to understand is everybody, I think, is created with a need to be loved. When God made us, he made us with that need. And I think one thing when I think about sin, like, have you ever seen a movie or TV show or something where someone is like on a frozen lake or a frozen river and they fall through the ice? Like, have you ever
Yes,
seen? Okay, and all they're doing is struggling to like find the hole, right? And what blows my mind is like, someone's on a frozen lake, they fall through the ice, and they don't just come back up through the hole. Somehow they're like, 20 feet away, and they're struggling to find their way out. And I'm like, bruh, just go back up the hole you just came out of, but they're not by that hole. But they're struggling because they're struggling to get out because they can't breathe, and they have this desperation, this need for air. And I feel like before we're saved, before we're following Jesus, because one of the things Jesus talked about is how he wants to give us living water. He told the woman at the well in John chapter 4, she'd been married and divorced 5 times and was living with a guy. And Jesus was like, you're basically said you're thirsty spiritually. He said there's something missing inside of you, and I want to satisfy what that is. She had gone through all these relationships, all these different marriages, trying to satisfy what was missing in her life. And I think that because we're created with a need for God's love, until we're actually satisfied with God's love and it's filling us and sustaining us, we go through all kinds of different sin. It's like we're stuck under the ice, desperately trying to breathe. What we need is God's love, but we're using everything else instead of it because we don't have it. And I feel like that, just as we were talking, I haven't used that metaphor in a while, but it just really, talking to you and listening to you made me think of that. And it seems like that was kind of what happened with you. So you had COVID in July of 2021.
yes, sir.
What day did you test positive? I got a reason for asking. This is a dumb reason, but
The
okay.
20 is like the 23rd.
Okay. No, I just asked because I had COVID in July of 2020, like a year before you. And I was like, and I think I tested positive right around the 9th. It was either the 9th or the 10th that I tested positive. That sucked.
Yeah,
um,
because I was in Colorado. I got altitude sickness. My sickle cell doesn't do well with altitude.
wow.
I just realized that. And then I got COVID at the same time, and I had to take a plane to get back home. It was
Wow.
terrible.
So you have COVID and you're stuck, I'm guess, quarantining because of COVID. Because if you get sick with COVID, regardless of what you think about anything, the government, conspiracy, whatever, quarantine if you got COVID, please.
I was
But
locked
but
in the house.
do what?
I was definitely locked in the house.
Yeah. What's that song from TikTok? I'm bored, or I don't know if it's from TikTok, but it's I'm bored in the house. I'm in the house bored.
Oh yeah, yeah. It's
Yeah.
from TikTok.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Sometimes I can't remember if something is from TikTok or the radio, or if TikTok made it famous to where it got on the radio, and that happens a bunch. But no, man. So you got stuck in quarantine. You've been, you spent, and this was your senior year in high school.
No, I was
You'd
actually
already graduated. Okay. So how old were you?
at that moment. I'm 19 now, so I was 18.
So you had just graduated high school. You've been chasing, trying to fill that void in your life. Nothing's been working, and you're now quarantined. You're stuck, isolated, and that's the point where God really, you connect with God, and you're just like, okay, I need God and not all this other crud. Is that
Yeah,
kind of?
I was at that moment, like my senior year, as I start figuring out what I'm gonna do with my life. Like my relationship was with God was topsoil, like just under the sand. It was topsoil, and quarantine is when it started to hit bedrock. So that's when I started to lock in a solid relationship with God
So
and put God first, honestly.
so when you say topsoil, that's probably a really good expression. I've never heard that before. So explain to me what that means, because I think I'm guessing that a lot of people will be able to connect to that and relate to that, and understanding that will probably help a lot of people.
So topsoil is like lukewarm people, basically the same thing.
Okay.
Like you're living for Jesus on the internet or in front of people, but behind closed doors, you're not really. So that's like topsoil. Like you're making that, you're saying that you love Jesus and making that commitment on Sundays or Wednesdays or whatever days you go to church, but other days than that, you're not living for Christ.
Okay. Okay. Man, that's such a miserable place to be. I've done that before, and man, it doesn't work. So you're stuck in quarantine, and you make that switch from, all this other stuff to wanting just God and saying, I'm going to follow you. And now you're working at a church, you're on staff. So the love that you had pursued through, um, through girls, through drugs, through everything else, that you never were able to obtain, because it was like, just like you said before, 5 minute pleasure or whatever you called it. How is it different now that you're following God? Because I'm guessing I can, how you're going to answer, because if you're not seeing this on YouTube, if you're listening to it, I'm going to tell you, I can see it on your face. Like the joy is like about to explode out of you, man. So how different is it? Put into words what I'm seeing on my computer screen.
Amazing, actually. So the love of the Lord is amazing. And God sends you people that will love you unconditionally. Like I have a boss who's like my best friend. He's not even considered my boss, but he's like my best friend. And I have coworkers who are like my best friends, and they're people of God. Like I know God sent them in my life for a reason. They love me when I'm wrong. They tell me I'm wrong. When I'm right, they tell me I'm right. They're there for me. And that's the love of the Lord. Like me waking up every day, I'm genuinely happy. There was days that I didn't even want to wake up. And I just love it. I'm
Nice.
very, very thankful for the places that he has brought me and where he has brought me from, because if it wasn't for him sending these lifelines and planting these seeds, I would be somewhere out lost, just still lost.
Yeah, man. I totally get that, and I kind of really relate to what you're kind of really, I get what you're saying, and I really relate to you, because, for me, it was like, I had that same thing. Like, I always felt lonely. I always felt alone. And I had this emptiness, and I always tried to fill it. And for me, it was really materialism. Like, I always wanted like stuff. And so I became a liar and a thief, and I was always running like a scam or a con or something, because I always thought, man, if I can have, the best latest smartphone, or, a good computer, or, a nice TV, or a big house, or a nice car, or, nice clothes, or, whatever it was, if I got, just money to blow, I always had felt like, man, if I can just have enough stuff, it will satisfy me. And no matter how much I got, it was never enough. And I mean, there were points where, periods in my life where I had a lot, but I just felt empty, and I just wanted more. And it always left me wanting more. And it wasn't until I found Jesus that I was like, man, the stuff doesn't really matter. And, I became very satisfied with God, very content with God. And what was crazy was, so I used to run a nonprofit mechanic company, and I was giving more than was coming in, but no matter how much of myself I gave away, God always like outgave back to me whatever I was giving away. And it just kind of was crazy. But it wasn't until I was satisfied with God and not worried about how much I had, that I really ever experienced happiness or fulfillment in my life.
That's amazing, honestly. God God just moves in mysterious ways and we don't really understand until the plan unfolds.
Yeah, and like with Moses, and a lot of times there's a sound on TikTok that's going around right now, and it says, "Do you ever wish Jesus would walk into a room, sit down with a cup of coffee, and say, 'Here's the plan'?" Like, I mean, that's what we feel like sometimes, right? We're just like, "Okay, God, what are we doing? What's going on? Your life is just going bananas, and you're just like, what's going on?" And like with Moses, Moses is talking to a burning bush, right? This bush that's on fire, that's not burning, says, "Hey, I got a plan for you, dude. Here's what we're going to do. Go get the people out of Egypt." Right. And God tells him, "I want you to get the people out of Egypt and get them to the promised land." What God doesn't tell Moses is, "Hey, it's going to take 40 years. God didn't give Moses all the details. He just said, "Here's the first step I want you to do. Here's where we're going to start." And if Moses knew everything that was going to happen, would he have gone through with it? Would he have followed God? I don't know. But, so often God doesn't give us all the details. He's like, "All right, man, here's where I want you to start. Here's the first step. Do this one thing." And then once we do that, he gives us the next thing, you know. So
It's
we don't
all
get the whole plan, just the start.
yeah, we definitely don't know the whole plan, but just know that when God gives you the plan and things you when I first got the plan, I didn't know. I said I was going to be a motivational speaker. Like that was the route. And God was like, "Okay, like God's you may say you're going to be something else and God's going to say the okay and with it, but then he's going to be like, you thought you were going to do that, now you're doing something different." Because modern day motivational speakers are preachers. Literally. That's the modern day preacher.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, I know. Without the Bible, though, without really solid biblical truth. Yeah. Ugh.
But there is some that speak the biblical truth. But now with me, it's like he's like, "Okay, you want to do that? Now I'm going to change it." It was like I didn't. Everyone was like, "Oh, you're going to be a pastor." I was like, "Bro, I don't want to be a pastor."
I, I for a long time I thought I was going to be a children's pastor. I got saved. I was running this nonprofit mechanic company, and the church I was going to, I was a volunteer children's pastor. Like, it wasn't a vocation or anything like that. I was leading children's church. I was counseling kids. Sometimes I'd go to summer camps. Did all the different like church activities with kids, and I wrote in my journal multiple times, "Hey, I'm going to be a children's pastor. This is where God is calling me." And what I didn't realize was that was just a period in my life where God was teaching me about how to minister to people, about how to love on people. Because before I got into children's ministry, I didn't like other people's kids. Like, I couldn't stand them. I had no patience. I was like, "Dude, you need to put your ankle biters away." And then, what's crazy is God doesn't always call people that are equipped to do something. He very often calls us to do something that we're not equipped to do, and then he equips us to do it. Like when he called me to be a children's pastor, like I said, I didn't have patience for other people's kids. I didn't like other people's kids. I had my own three daughters, and that was all I needed. But God really quickly just poured his love into me and for these kids. Like, he really quickly caused me to see them the way that he did. And he just taught me about how to minister to people through that time in my life. And then I went and helped plant a church. I actually went to school to study church planting. And again, I thought, I'm going to be a church planter. And I went and helped plant a church. I was an elder. I was the children's pastor at that church. And I thought, this is it. I'm going to be a church planter. I'm going to go off and plant a church somewhere. And God was like, "Nah, I'm just training you. I'm equipping you to strengthen other believers." And, all these things that God has taken me through, and he just keeps putting me in like different ministries. He produces fruit through it. And, and now I'm on TikTok and I have this podcast, and I never I remember when I first saw TikTok, it was 2.5-ish years ago. I saw an ad on TV, and I was, about 40 at the time, just a little bit over. I'm 43. And I saw this ad on TV with these dancing teenagers, and I'm like, that is the stupidest thing I've ever seen. I remember you got these, this 14, 15-year-old, teenage boy and teenage girl, and they're dancing and lip singing or something stupid, right? And I'm like, this is the dumbest garbage. I'm never gonna download this app. I'm never gonna watch it. I don't want anything to do with it. I've never been big into social media. And lo and behold, God is like, nah, dude. He's like, bro, I'm going to put you on social media. I'm going to put you on TikTok and you're going to talk to people about me. And I am blown away at the way that God took the, years that I spent as a children's pastor, as a church planter, and all the other things that he had me do really equipped me to be able to strengthen other believers through being on TikTok. It's the dumbest. I mean, I never would have planned it. I never would have planned the journey that I had. It blows my mind because God really just got me to this point where I'm at. And I keep looking around going, how did this happen? And God's like, man, I had a plan the whole time, dummy.
He searches for those that no one else would look for. He searches for imperfect people, like
Oh,
people that know that they're sinners, and like he ate with tax collectors and murderers. Like people don't understand that. He searches for the outlaws, like the people that are the the outcasts.
yeah. Yeah, and I love that about God because we're all just like you. You were looking to be loved. Like that was your driving force behind all that stuff. And God is, I love in Romans 5 when it calls what God gives us a free gift. It says in Romans 5:8, God demonstrates his love in that while we were sinners, Christ died for us. Talks about how before we become saved, we're enemies of God. And while we were his enemies, while we were opposed to him, while we're living in rebellion against God, God is going, I love you so much that I want to save you out of that. And I'm blown away when I think about we all need this love, and God is like desperate to get it to us almost, and some people are like, oh, God's not desperate. I'm like, I don't know. I'm like, it just everything that he went through to get us his love just blows my mind because I don't know that I've ever loved anybody to the extent that God does. And I'm constantly praying that God will help me to love people more because I'm not as good at it as he is.
Yeah, before I started doing this, I had no cares about what anybody else had going on with their lives, and God really softened my heart to be able to love others, especially love them more than I love myself. Like he definitely saw.
Yeah, it's amazing the way that God changes us and pulls us out of the mess that we make of our lives. And when we have faith in Jesus and surrender our life to God and give him control, the way that he just takes us and makes our life really, I think, unexplainable apart from him, because all the stuff that we're chasing before him, we can really only find in him. So yeah, man. Wow. So what's you're on staff at a church now? And what stuff do you do there as a on staff person at a church? Are you a pastor? Are you what do you do?
So I work in student outreach.
Okay.
So we're faith-based partners with a couple of schools in our area, and I have a school, yeah, that I'm over. So I'm just there to pour into the school, and with whether it's with me speaking to kids or me just being there for kids or pouring money into the community. That's basically my job.
Oh man, I that sounds like fun. I mean that oh yeah, that sounds like a blast. I bet you really enjoy getting to do that. I bet it's just insanely satisfying.
It's not even a job, it's just my lifestyle, honestly.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah, I've been a mechanic for 20 years and I always enjoyed doing it. Like when I was a little kid, I always wanted to be a mechanic. It was something that I wanted from the time I was, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 years old. I got to do it for 20 years and I was forced to medically retire at the end of last year. And I've always enjoyed getting to like minister to people, get to talk to people about Jesus. And now, like, I'm, you know, pretty much full time. I'm now, doing this podcast. I'm on TikTok. I'm talking to people there. And I'm like, I love what I'm doing. I'm just, I'm taking God in and then pouring out what I'm taking in. And it's the greatest thing ever, you know? But it wasn't something where I ever would have thought I'd be at this place in my life. I thought I was going to retire as a mechanic. I was content doing that. But until I got to where I was at this point, I didn't realize how much better this is.
It's way better. It's way better. It's the best thing that you could ever ask for.
Yeah. But I'll say this too. There's a lot of people who, this is the way that I'm built. Like God built me to do something like this. He built you to do what you're doing. There are some people where God has built them to be a mechanic and live as a Christian in that industry, or to be a stay-at-home parent, where that's what he's built them and called them to do. And I for me, I'm like, this is the greatest thing I've ever done. I've been doing this since really like November of 2021, and I'm like, this is the greatest thing ever. I'm freaking loving it, man. But there's people, I think, that if they were doing this, they wouldn't, it's not what they're built to do, so they wouldn't enjoy it the way that I am, because they'd have to leave, whatever it is God has called them to do.
Yeah. Everyone has a different plan and everyone has a different vision.
Yeah.
And God puts certain people in certain areas because he knows that's where they were striving most.
Yeah. Awesome. So here's what I want to do. What is something, or just some things that you feel like God has got on your heart that you want to like get off your chest right now? Like, what's stuff you want to talk about? I'm giving you the floor. Say whatever you want, man.
I really just have one thing, honestly. There's not a lot, but I had a video idea for this morning and I forgot it, and you reminded me it.
Okay. What's the video idea? I want to hear this.
That God searches for imperfect people.
Oh.
For whoever's listening to this right now, I don't know where you at, or you in your walk with faith with Christ. I don't know if you're starting over. I don't know if you're still out there doing whatever the world has got going on. But I just want you to know that God searches for imperfect people, and you have a vision. God gives you the vision. And there's going to be Pharisees out there that don't understand the vision.
Yeah.
But he gave that vision to you for a reason and not them.
Yeah, man. And one of the main things that I try and focus on, I hear so many people that are like, I wish I knew God's will for my life, or they think that, God is looking to use like pastors or people on staff at churches like you, or, missionaries. And those are the people that God works through. But the thing that I want everybody to understand, and I say this a lot, God wants to take anybody who will live by faith and follow Jesus and make your life unexplainable apart from him. Like, God isn't like, okay, I've got to find someone who is a really good speaker to do this, or I've got to find someone that's been to 4 years of college plus seminary to go do this, or God isn't looking for what your qualifications are. There's one thing that God's looking for from us. Will you follow him by faith? Like, that's it. Hebrews 11:6 says, without faith, it's impossible to please God. For those who come to God must believe that he exists and that he rewards those who diligently seek him. That's what God's looking for. Do I trust God to work through me? In Acts 1:8, Jesus said, when you receive the gift of the Holy Spirit, you'll receive power to be my witnesses to the entire world. In the Gospels, one of the things Jesus talked about was, he said, you don't have to worry about what you're going to say in advance. You don't have to plan ahead what you're going to say when you're called on to give an account for your life. He said, because the Holy Spirit is going to give you the words in that moment, and he's going to speak through you. And so often, I get people on TikTok that are like, I don't know what to say. I don't know how to share the gospel. And I'm like, so much of it is not dependent on how much you know or how good of a speaker you are or any of that stuff. It's dependent. The only thing that's dependent on you is, are you willing to step out in faith and try? And when you do that, God speaks through you and God works through you. It doesn't matter about you. Just live by faith, and God will do amazing things through your life that you can't even imagine.
It would definitely. You don't have to. You don't have to have the qualifications. Is the biggest thing out of what we both just said. You
Yeah.
don't have to be perfect, and you don't have to have the qualifications, because if you're meant to be in that room, God's going to open that door,
Yeah.
and no one's going to be able to close it. Once He opens something, no one can close it. No
Yeah.
one can stop what He has put into plan. All you have to do is just have faith and follow Him. That's the it sounds hard sometimes, but it's so simple. It's
Yeah.
so.
Yeah. I was talking to another person from TikTok yesterday. Her name is Meadow. Her username on TikTok is Meadow Queen Butterfly. She was uh, she was born a girl, transitioned to a male, was a and then got into drugs, the occult, different things, and then just got saved in on April 1st of 2021. So brand new Christian, right? Didn't know, doesn't know much about the Bible, is just kind of really reading the Bible for the first time. And she was telling me about, okay, so God delivered her out of being transgender, delivered her out of drugs, out of demon worship. Like, it wasn't just the occult, like she was worshiping this demon called Baphomet. And so delivered her all out of all that. And now she's leading people to Jesus. She doesn't know the Bible as well as someone that's been to seminary. I mean, she's new to it, but she's reading the Bible. She's talking to people about Jesus and what God's done in her life. She is stepping out in faith and just telling people, hey, here's what God did in my life. And she's seeing people's lives transformed. Brand new baby Christian. And God is using her in amazing, mighty ways, not because she's well equipped, not because she's a great speaker, not because of anything else, but because she's letting God work through her. She's stepping out in faith, and God is doing the work through her because God Himself, the Holy Spirit, lives inside of her and is the one doing it. She's just choosing to live by faith and trust God instead of worrying about her inadequacies.
It's funny that you bring her up. She popped up on my For You page a couple of months back, and yesterday or 2 days ago, she just popped up in my head randomly. And it's funny that you bring her up, because I know exactly who you're talking about. And it's crazy because you could be doing one thing, and just single encounter with the Holy Spirit can change your life forever.
Yeah. Yeah, man. So what I'd like to do now is I want you in give me a 3-minute TikTok video or less, share the gospel.
Ooh, ooh. Hold on, I got one in my journal.
All right. All right.
I'll get y'all a good.
Yeah, 'cause now here's the thing. I think as Christians, us being able to share the gospel and talk to people about Jesus, it's not about how much we know, but it is important for us to know the gospel, to like know the basics. And when we start stepping out in faith and saying, I want to share the gospel with people, I want to tell people about Jesus, the right words, the words that you need to that person, because everyone needs to hear the message of the gospel, but because people are different, they might need to hear different parts of it or hear it presented in a different way. And the Holy Spirit knows that. So He brings to our mind what we need to hear. So, yeah, man. All right. Share the gospel, bud.
I got you. So this one is about killing the craving. So all things that taste good to you doesn't mean they're good for you. See, there's a bag of Doritos, a bowl of broccoli. Off rip, your mind is going to be like, oh, I want those Doritos. They're going to taste good. But the nutrients in those Doritos compared to the broccoli, what is it? There is none. There is no big comparison. See, in life, we're going to go for the Doritos because the color, the pop, they taste good, the crunch, but we're not going to go for broccoli because broccoli is considered healthy. And that could be your life with God. See, you want to go after and chase the sin because the sin tastes good at the moment, but at the end of the day, it's not good for you. You don't want to sit there and chase the broccoli because the broccoli seems boring or the broccoli may not taste good, but the broccoli has good nutrients. It has a good outcome. It's good for you. It's going to help better your life. And you may be in a moment right now or in a season right now where you have two different choices. One of those choices is broccoli. One of those choices is Doritos. And so much of temptation wants you to pick those Doritos. But at the end of the day, you got to pick the broccoli. So go eat healthy and pick the broccoli.
Yeah,
That's all. That's me.
I like that, man. And the reality is going back to your 5-minute thing, like I like what you said, it's 5 minutes of pleasure, going back to that. Okay. I'm 43 years old and my problem is, talking about food is I picked the Doritos for forever. And like when you're in your early 20s, it doesn't really matter what you eat because your metabolism is so, off the walls, just hyper that you can eat whatever you want and you're going to burn it off. I mean, it doesn't matter, as long as you're just getting enough of whatever. But the reality is it's going to catch up with you.
Well,
And those Doritos. And so now, by the way, I'm still have issues from having had COVID. Like I'm still having issues. I can't eat Doritos anymore. I cannot eat nacho cheese or Cool Ranch Doritos. And yeah, it's the most horrible taste in the world to me. It took me a year and a half before I could eat bacon again. I couldn't eat bacon for a year and a half because when I would eat bacon, all I could taste was salt. And the worst thing ever. But I believe that bacon is the solution to world peace. No, not really. But anyways, I love bacon. But what I love about your analogy is, those Doritos, they're going to taste really good because like before I had COVID, I loved Doritos, especially Cool Ranch Doritos with bean dip, man. That was good. That is, that is a snack right there, man. And I could, execute like a whole, family size bag of Doritos and 2 things of bean dip. And when I was in my 20s and I was, into sports and stuff, like it didn't bug me. And, that could be my lunch and I was good to go. When I was in high school, my favorite thing ever, my favorite lunch when I was in high school, McDonald's used to have this back in the 90s. They had a thing called humongous size. You could get a 44-ounce cup of McDonald's French fries. Humongous size. They don't make it anymore. They don't sell it anymore. But for like $5, I would go to McDonald's my junior and senior year once I started driving, and I would buy a 44-ounce cup of fries and whatever kind of soda I was drinking, and that would be my lunch. Greatest thing ever. I don't have anymore. But yeah, but the thing is that thing that tastes good, it's going to catch up with you because now at 43 years old, like if I eat like that, man, I can't, my metabolism is slowed way down. I can't just get rid of that stuff. And, my blood pressure is up and, my poor food choices in my 20s and my 30s are really kicking me in the rear end now. And I wish I would have had more broccoli, and sin is like that because it really does wreck our life and it feels good at the time, but in the long run, it leaves us empty and hollow and more broken than we were because you start out just broken going, man, I need to be loved. But then it just tears you up. It leaves you not only desperate, more lacking love, but you end up, I don't know, man, it wrecks you. So yeah, I like that analogy. So
I'm very big in the analogies and the parables
yeah.
because it's easier for people to understand that way.
Yeah. Well, I think stories are important. I think they help connect stuff. And that's, you look at Jesus, he was constantly teaching in parables. And I love that because when he's teaching in a parable, it makes what he's saying just pop. Like you're like, oh man, because you're painting this visual picture that everybody, regardless of whether you're neurotypical or not. I mean, you get someone who's got like crazy ADHD, and the parable that Jesus is laying out, like the sower and the seed, like you're hooked, you're listening, you're like, tunnel vision on, man, what's this dude saying? And all of his stuff, he's telling the story of the prodigal son in the book of Luke. And I mean, regardless of anything, you're like hooked because you can see yourself in that story. You can, it's relatable. You hear the story of the Good Samaritan. I mean, it's a parable, and you're just like, you're listening to Jesus and you're hooked. It just paints such a great picture of what he's trying to say. So I want to share the gospel now. This is my favorite, kind of like my go-to. It has been for a minute now. The thief on the cross next to Jesus. You got two thieves that died on the cross next to Jesus, right? In the morning, when you read about them in the gospels, they both started out after all three of them were crucified. Jesus is in the middle cross. There's a thief on his right hand and a thief on his left hand. They started out both mocking Jesus, and they were like, if you're the Son of God, if you're really God, get us down from here. You did all those miracles, get us down. And they didn't want to die, and they were about to die. But then later on, we read in the book of Luke that one of the thieves, he says, you know what? He has a change of mind. He says, you know what? We're guilty and we're getting what we deserve. He said, Jesus is innocent. And he looks at Jesus, and this blows my mind. This is probably one of the most ridiculous things anybody in the Bible said. He looks at Jesus, who's about to die, and he says, remember me today when you come into your kingdom. And what blows my mind about him saying that is he realizes he's a guilty sinner that needs to be saved, right? So he looks at Jesus, who is 100% chance Jesus is going to die, and he knows that Jesus is going to die. But he says, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Dude, that's bananas, because how many people, DeMarlynn, after they die, become the king of a kingdom in the history of the world besides Jesus? Yeah, he's showing me a zero. Nobody. And somehow this guy is convinced that Jesus, after his death, is going to become the king of a kingdom. He says, remember me when you come into your kingdom. How ridiculous is that?
Because he knows.
It's faith, because this is faith, and it's not just blind faith. A lot of people are like, well, Christianity is blind faith, but it's not blind faith. Check this out. How many miracles had Jesus been doing all over Israel for 3 years? How many crazy, amazing miracles had he done that were impossible to do? I mean, dude, he fed 5,000 people with a sack lunch, right? I mean, one of the most bananas ones is he healed people that were maimed. Maimed means you are missing a body part. So imagine your Uncle Jim is working on whatever, he's at work, and there's an accident and he gets his arm chopped off. Well, they didn't have medicine back then where you could go to the doctor and get it, put back on. It just gone. 10 years later, Jesus rolls into town with his entourage of followers. You take Uncle Joe or Jim or whatever I said his name was, it doesn't matter. But you take Uncle one arm to go see Jesus. Jesus puts his hand on him and his arm regrows. Like where there is no arm, all of a sudden there's an arm. Dude, I mean, this guy had heard that stuff. So he doesn't know how Jesus is going to come into his kingdom, but he knows that he's heard Jesus talk about, he knows that Jesus is considered the king of the Jews. There's a sign on Jesus or on his cross above him that says, this is the king of the Jews. I mean, it was stated, everybody in Israel knew that Jesus was somehow like the king of the Jews. They didn't totally understand, but this guy had faith in Jesus based on some kind of evidence. It didn't make sense. He couldn't see it was coming, but he had faith. And Jesus, and I love his response, he says, truly, truly, I say to you, today you'll be with me in paradise. I mean, all this guy did was he repented. He recognized that he was a sinner in need of a savior. He said, I'm a guilty sinner. I'm getting what I deserve. He looked at Jesus and said, you can save me. You can do something for me. When you come into your kingdom today, don't forget about me. Please remember me. And Jesus was like, yeah, man, I got you. I mean, it was, yeah.
He's a forgiver. He's a forgiver, most definitely. He's a forgiver.
Yeah. And that's all God is looking for from us, is to realize that we're a sinner in need of a savior, that the love that we want, we're not going to get it from chasing that 5-minute pleasure, that nothing in this world is going to satisfy us. And it may not look like it. It may look impossible, but Jesus can satisfy us where nothing else can. He's the only thing that can satisfy us. Yeah, man. You got anything else you want to say before we get out of here?
Well, I just want to say I love everybody, and I just want to say thank you for having me on here, honestly.
Man, I love your story. So let me ask you this. So how can people connect with you? I know you're on TikTok. How can people find you on TikTok? Where else besides TikTok can people find you if you want them to find you anywhere else? Don't tell me your house because we don't want, we don't want people showing up going, but but social media wise, where can people connect with you?
Well, my Instagram and my TikTok are the same. It's D uplifted. So
Say,
D
say
B.
that, say that again, because you were breaking up.
Okay, so my Instagram and TikTok, they're the same. It's D-Bell uplifted. So DBELL uplifted. UPLFIFTED. I think I spelled up right.
Yeah.
But the difference between TikTok and Instagram, before uplifted on Instagram, there's an underscore. So it's D-Bell underscore uplifted.
Okay. Yeah. I will, in the description of this video, I will post links or whatever to your Instagram and your TikTok. So if people want to see your content, and I got to say, I love your content. It's super uplifting. It's fun. It's a good time, and it honors God. It definitely honors Jesus. So I will, in the description of this, I will have your TikTok and Instagram info.
Amazing. Thank you.
Awesome, man. All right, love it. This has been the Crazy God Story podcast. It's available on Apple, on Spotify, Anchor, and YouTube. It's free on all those platforms. There's no charge for it. It's also available as a subscription based podcast on Patreon. If you subscribe to it on Patreon, you get Crazy God Story merchandise. If you want to support me, that's how you can do it. I've also got a book called Crazy God Story, Faith Isn't Blind. I used to run a nonprofit mechanic company. My full-time job was fixing cars for broke people for free. Never asked anyone for money or got a paycheck or anything. My life was unexplainable apart from God. I saw him at work constantly on a regular basis. My life looked like something out of the book of Acts. That book, it's my journal about that time and just lays it out. And then the last part of the book just kind of goes through some real basic stuff on how to get to a point in your life where living by faith and following Jesus is as natural as breathing. You can get the book on Amazon, or you can download a free PDF copy at crazygodstory.com, where there is absolutely no charge. Y'all have a good afternoon.